Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. The morning felt ordinary, like so many others before it. The kids were running around, dodging my attempts to wrangle them into their school clothes. Claire sat at the kitchen counter, sipping her coffee with a distracted air. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, marveling at how she seemed to glide through life with a calm I could never muster. She was always poised, always prepared. At least, that's what I believed then. As I hurried the kids into the car for school, my phone buzzed. It was Claire, calling me from upstairs. That wasn't unusual, we often used the phone to communicate in our busy household. But when I answered, there was something in her voice. "Hey, just a quick thing," she started, a nervous edge in her tone. "I lost my purse last night at the hotel lobby. Can you cancel our credit cards?" My brow furrowed. "What happened?" "Oh, it was silly, really. I was picking up a newspaper, left my purse on the counter for just a second, and when I turned back, it was gone. Hotel staff is looking for it, but, well, better safe than sorry, right?" I agreed and promised to handle it after dropping off the kids. She thanked me and hung up, leaving me with a gnawing sense of unease. Claire rarely lost anything. She was meticulous to a fault, the kind of person who made lists about making lists. Something about this felt off. By the time I got home, the feeling had burrowed deeper. I pulled up our bank account and canceled the cards as promised. Then, as I sat at the kitchen table, my eyes drifted to the neatly stacked folders she kept in the cabinet. Claire managed her own finances, including a separate investment account funded by an inheritance from her parents. It wasn't that I distrusted her, I respected her independence, but I'd never paid much attention to it before. Today, curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the folder labeled Fidelity and flipped it open. At first, it seemed ordinary, statements of deposits, some gains from investments. Then, a single line jumped out at me, a $3,000 withdrawal from her money market account 6 weeks ago. My heart skipped a beat. Claire never mentioned a withdrawal that large, and we hadn't made any big purchases recently. I flipped through the pages, looking for clues, and found a note: the check had been made out to a local jeweler. My mind raced. Jewelry. Claire didn't wear much of it, and if she had bought something, wouldn't she have told me? My stomach churned as questions piled up, each one more troubling than the last. Unable to resist, I looked up the jeweler's number and dialed. A polite woman answered, and I quickly explained, claiming I needed details about a purchase for warranty purposes. She hesitated before pulling up the transaction. "Oh yes," she said. "I remember this one. Your wife was replacing her wedding and engagement rings. She mentioned they'd been stolen." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Stolen? Claire had never told me she lost her rings. Why would she replace them without a word? The room seemed to spin as I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. The rest of the day passed in a haze. When Claire came home that evening, she kissed me on the cheek and asked about my day. I managed a strained smile, my mind screaming with questions I couldn't yet bring myself to ask. I needed more than just suspicions, I needed answers. That night, while she slept, I reached for her phone. It was locked, but I knew her passcode. It was the date of our first date. My hands trembled as I navigated her messages. Most of them were harmless, chats with friends, reminders from work. But then I found a series of texts from someone named L. My heart sank as I read them. They were casual at first, work-related, I guessed, but the tone shifted in later messages. Inside jokes. References to meetings that didn't seem professional. And then the last message, which sent my stomach plummeting: "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." I put the phone down and sat in the dark, my mind racing. Claire had always been my rock, the steady hand in our chaotic lives. But now, cracks were showing in the foundation of our marriage, cracks I couldn't ignore. I decided I needed more proof. If I confronted her now, she'd deny it. She'd make me feel paranoid or dismiss it as nothing. No, I needed to be certain. The next morning, I installed tracking software on her phone. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, it felt invasive, even cruel. But the alternative was worse, living in the dark, unsure of the truth. Over the next week, I watched as Claire's life unfolded in secret. Her work trips weren't to meetings or conferences. They were to quiet dinners and overnight stays at hotels. The tracker didn't lie. And neither did the messages she exchanged with Elle. Each revelation felt like another knife in my heart. This wasn't just a momentary lapse, a one-time mistake. This was deliberate. Calculated. She had built an entire second life, all while I stayed home, raising our kids and trusting her implicitly. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that I had been so blind to it. Looking back, the signs were there, her distracted moments, her increasing absences, the way she avoided my touch on some nights. But I had ignored them, telling myself everything was fine. Because that's what you do when you love someone. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed, screenshots of texts, locations of her rendezvous, even photos from the tracker app. The evidence was irrefutable. Now, it was just a matter of deciding what to do next. I sat alone in the living room that night, staring at the folder of evidence on the coffee table. The weight of it pressed down on me, suffocating. This wasn't just about Claire's betrayal, it was about the life we had built together, the future I thought we shared. And now, it was all falling apart. The days after uncovering Claire's betrayal felt like a waking nightmare. Every glance in her direction, every casual touch or fleeting smile, carried the sting of 1,000 lies. She moved through our home as if nothing had changed, as if she wasn't balancing two lives on the same tightrope. The worst part was the effortlessness of her deceit. It made me wonder how long she'd been perfecting this act. I kept the evidence hidden in a folder in my office, buried beneath mundane files. Every so often, I would glance at it, feeling the weight of its contents. Proof of her infidelity, texts, locations, receipts, sat like a time bomb in my home, waiting for me to decide when to detonate it. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to understand her motives, her reasoning, and most importantly, how she could do this to me and our family. One evening, while she was in the shower, I opened her laptop. She rarely used it at home, so I assumed it was a safer bet than her phone. Her email account was already logged in. I scrolled through messages, searching for clues. Most were mundane, work, updates from school for the kids, but then I found an email chain with someone named Lucas. The emails mirrored the tone of the texts I'd seen. Playful. Flirty. Intimate. One email in particular caught my eye. Lucas. Last night was everything I needed. I can't stop thinking about you. This is getting harder to keep secret, but I can't let go of what we have. Let's meet again next week. Same place. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles turned white. Harder to keep secret. What else was she hiding? I continued scrolling until I found what I feared most, a hotel reservation confirmation from 3 weeks prior. The date coincided with one of her work trips. A cold rage burned inside me. How many more nights had she spent in hotel rooms with this man? How many times had I kissed her goodbye, clueless about where she was really going? My hand hovered over the mouse, torn between wanting to close the laptop and wanting to keep digging. I kept digging. The emails painted a vivid picture of a relationship that wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Claire wasn't just cheating on me, she was confiding in Lucas, sharing thoughts and feelings that used to be mine alone. She told him about her dreams, her frustrations, even her worries about our marriage. Reading her words felt like watching someone else's life play out on the screen, someone who wore my wife's face but wasn't her. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her emails, her texts, the evidence of her double life. I felt like a stranger in my own home, trapped in a marriage that had become a lie. But I still wasn't ready to confront her. Not until I had a plan. The following morning, I called my attorney. Until that moment, I hadn't even considered divorce. It felt too final, too drastic. But as I laid out the situation, explaining Claire's betrayal in as much detail as I could stomach, my attorney listened patiently and offered a grim smile. "This isn't uncommon," she said. "Unfortunately, infidelity cases like this rarely end well. But you're doing the right thing by gathering evidence. If you want to protect your assets and custody of your kids, you'll need to present a clear case." The thought of custody hit me like a truck. The kids. How would this affect them? They were too young to understand the complexities of adult relationships, but old enough to notice when something wasn't right. My attorney assured me that the courts would favor stability, which meant the kids would likely stay with me, especially given the evidence I had. It was a small comfort in an otherwise devastating conversation. After the call, I sat in my car outside the office for a long time, staring blankly at the dashboard. Divorce. It wasn't just a word, it was the death of everything I thought I'd built with Claire. The memories, the plans, the promises, they all felt meaningless now. But what other choice did I have? I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me so deeply. That weekend, Claire announced another work trip. I nodded silently as she kissed me goodbye and left the house. As soon as she was gone, I packed the kids into the car and dropped them off at my parents' house. They didn't ask many questions, sensing that something was wrong but knowing better than to press me for answers. With the house empty, I got to work. I combed through every corner of our home, looking for more clues. Her closet, her drawers, her car, nothing was off limits. In the glove compartment of her car, I found a receipt for a restaurant I didn't recognize. The date matched another of her work trips. I googled the name and saw it was a fine dining establishment in the same city where Lucas lived. My stomach twisted. In the laundry room, I found a small gift bag hidden behind the detergent. Inside was a box of expensive cologne, still wrapped in tissue paper. It wasn't my brand. I stared at it, my hands trembling. Was this for him? A gift for the man who had stolen my wife? As the day wore on, my anger grew. I thought about smashing the bottle of cologne, about ripping up the receipt, about erasing every trace of her infidelity from my home. But I stopped myself. This wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. I needed her to see the truth, to understand the depth of her betrayal and the consequences it would bring. That night, when Claire returned, I was waiting for her. She walked through the door, her face flushed from the cold, and smiled at me. It was the same smile that had once made me fall in love with her, the smile that now felt like a mask. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down. "How were the kids?" "Fine," I replied, my voice flat. "They're at my parents' tonight." She hesitated, sensing something was off. "Oh. Why?" "I needed some time to think," I said. "About us." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I motioned to the living room. "Sit down. We need to talk." She followed me reluctantly, her eyes scanning my face for clues. I sat across from her, the folder of evidence resting on the coffee table between us. For a moment, I said nothing, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. "Claire," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I know." Her brow furrowed. "Know what?" I slid the folder across the table. "Everything." She stared at the folder, her hands trembling as she opened it. The color drained from her face as she flipped through the pages, the texts, the receipts, the emails. She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "Let me explain," she whispered. I shook my head. Not tonight. I've heard enough. Her tears began to fall, but I felt nothing. The love I once had for her was buried beneath the weight of her betrayal. For now, all I wanted was the truth, and the freedom to decide what came next. The silence between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. Claire stared at the folder on the table, her trembling hands resting on its edge. Her tears streaked her face, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not now. Not after everything I'd discovered. I wanted her to speak, to explain, to confess, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of pretending this was salvageable. Mark, she began, her voice shaky. Don't, I interrupted sharply. Don't insult me by lying or making excuses. I've seen the texts, the emails, the receipts. I know about the hotel rooms, the dinners, the gifts. I know about Lucas. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if she were a fish gasping for air. It's not what you think, she finally managed, the cliché making my blood boil. Then what is it, Claire? Help me understand, because from where I'm sitting, you've been cheating on me for months, maybe longer. You've lied to me, to our kids, to everyone around us. So, please, tell me what it is, if it's not what I think. Her head dropped into her hands as a sob escaped her. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. It just did. I laughed bitterly. Right. That's how it always starts, isn't it? Just a slip, a mistake, a one-time thing that magically becomes an ongoing affair. Don't treat me like an idiot, Claire. She flinched at the harshness of my tone. I never wanted to hurt you. Congratulations. You failed, I snapped. You didn't just hurt me. You obliterated everything we built together. Do you have any idea what it's like to discover your wife has been living a double life? To realize the person you trusted most is a stranger. I still love you, she said desperately, reaching for my hand. I do. I pulled away before she could touch me. You don't get to say that anymore. Not after what you've done. Love doesn't look like this, Claire. Love doesn't come with lies and secrets and another man in your bed. She sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking. I didn't know how to stop. I got caught up in it. It wasn't serious, it was just an escape. An escape from what? I demanded. From me? From our kids? From the life we've built together? She hesitated, her eyes filled with guilt. From myself, she admitted. From feeling trapped, from feeling like I've lost who I am. I don't know how I got here, Mark. I don't even recognize myself anymore. Her words hit me in a way I didn't expect. For a moment, I saw not just the betrayer, but a broken woman who had lost her way. But the anger was too raw, too consuming to let empathy take root. That's not an excuse, I said coldly. You had options. You could have talked to me. You could have asked for help. Hell, you could have left me if you were that unhappy. But instead, you chose to cheat. You chose to destroy our marriage behind my back. She nodded, her tears falling freely now. You're right. I was selfish. I didn't think about how much I was hurting you. I didn't think at all. I stood, pacing the room as I ran a hand through my hair. The weight of her confession pressed down on me, suffocating. So what now, Claire? What do you want me to do with this? Forgive you? Pretend this never happened? She looked up at me, her face pale and streaked with mascara. I want to fix this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll do whatever it takes, Mark. Therapy, counseling, anything. Please, don't give up on us. I stopped pacing and turned to face her, my jaw tight. You don't get to ask that of me. You don't get to plead for a second chance after you destroyed the first one. Do you even realize how much damage you've done? She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop her. I don't trust you anymore, Claire. And without trust, there's nothing left. The next few days were a blur of tense silences and barely contained rage. Claire tried to act normal for the kids, but they sensed something was off. They asked why Mom seemed sad, why Dad was quiet. I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could I explain something so ugly to them? How could I shatter their innocence with the truth? At night, Claire slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment of our marriage. The good times felt tainted now, overshadowed by the knowledge of her betrayal. Were they ever real? Or had she been lying to me from the start? I thought about the life we'd built together, the memories we'd shared, the future we'd planned. And then I thought about Lucas. The man who had stolen her attention, her affection, her loyalty. The man who had taken what was supposed to be mine. The thought made my blood boil. On the third night, I made a decision. This wasn't just about my broken marriage anymore, it was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my freedom. If Claire wanted to fix things, she'd have to do it without me. I couldn't stay in a marriage that had become a prison of lies. The next morning, I called my attorney. I'm ready, I said simply. She didn't ask for details, just set a date to finalize the paperwork. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Ending the marriage felt like cutting off a gangrenous limb, it was painful, but necessary for survival. That evening, I told Claire. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her coffee cup, when I placed the papers in front of her. What's this? She asked, her voice wary. My decision, I said. I can't do this anymore, Claire. I'm filing for divorce. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might fight me. But then she slumped back in her chair, defeated. I don't blame you, she said softly. I deserve this. Her acceptance should have made me feel vindicated, but it didn't. It just felt hollow. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. I'm doing it because I can't live like this. I need to move on, for my sake and for the kids. We deserve better than this. She nodded, her tears silent this time. I'll sign, she said. Whatever you need, I'll do it. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of peace. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was a start. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The divorce moved forward faster than I expected. Claire signed the papers without hesitation, almost as though she'd been waiting for the moment when she could stop pretending. She still tried to make amends in small ways, apologizing at every opportunity, offering to take the kids so I could have a break, but I kept my distance. I was done. Or so I thought. The kids took the news harder than I imagined. Emma, our oldest, was quiet, her 13-year-old mind trying to process the unspoken tension between her parents. Ben, only 8, asked the same heartbreaking question over and over, if Mommy is sorry, why can't we all stay together? I didn't know how to answer him. All I could do was reassure them both that none of this was their fault. It didn't stop the tears or the confusion in their eyes, but it was the best I could offer. Months passed. The house felt emptier without Claire, though I would never admit it. The kids split their time between us, and on the nights they weren't home, the silence was deafening. I threw myself into work, hoping to fill the void with productivity. But every corner of the house seemed haunted by the echoes of a life that no longer existed. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table flipping through the day's mail, I found a letter from Claire. It wasn't typed, just her handwriting on simple stationery. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I was ready to hear what she had to say. Mark. I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again, I'm sorry. For everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I don't expect it. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when I was at my worst. I've made so many mistakes, and I'll carry the weight of them for the rest of my life. But losing you and the kids has been more painful than I ever imagined. Please take care of them. Tell them I love them every single day, even if I can't be there. You've always been a better parent than I ever was. With love. Claire. The letter felt final in a way I couldn't explain. I reread it several times, trying to decipher the undertones, but no clarity came. Part of me wanted to crumple it up and throw it away. Another part wanted to call her, to demand what she meant by even if I can't be there. But I didn't. 2 days later, I got the call. It was Claire's sister, her voice trembling with panic. "Mark, it's Claire," she said, barely able to get the words out. "She's in the hospital. You need to come." The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. My mind raced with possibilities, an accident, an illness, something sudden. I thought about the letter again, its melancholy tone, and dread settled in my stomach. When I arrived, her sister met me in the hallway, her face pale and streaked with tears. "She overdosed," she said, her voice breaking. "They found her this morning." My knees went weak, and I leaned against the wall for support. "Is she?" "She's alive," she said quickly, though her expression told me the fight wasn't over. "But it's bad, Mark. The doctors don't know if she'll wake up." Sitting by her hospital bed was surreal. Claire looked fragile, a shadow of the woman I once knew. The tubes and machines keeping her alive hummed softly, a stark reminder of how close she'd come to leaving us all behind. I stared at her face, searching for some semblance of the person I had loved, but all I saw was a stranger. The doctor explained that she had taken a dangerous mix of pills and alcohol. It wasn't clear whether it was a cry for help or an intentional attempt to end her life. The letter she left behind offered no clear answers, only more questions. For hours, I sat there, wrestling with a storm of emotions. Anger, guilt, sadness, they all tangled together, suffocating me. I wanted to hate her for what she'd done, but all I could feel was an aching sense of loss. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. This was about a woman I had spent half my life with, the mother of my children, teetering on the edge of oblivion. The days blurred together. Claire remained unconscious, and the doctors warned that even if she woke up, she might not be the same. The kids were too young to understand the gravity of what was happening. I told them Mommy was sick and needed rest, but Emma wasn't fooled. She looked at me with her mother's piercing eyes, unspoken questions lingering between us. When Claire finally woke, it wasn't the relief I had hoped for. She was groggy, disoriented, and visibly broken. The doctors said her recovery would be long and uncertain. Mentally, she was fragile, and physically, her body had taken a significant toll. She couldn't return home, not yet. She needed treatment, therapy, and time to heal. I thought about everything we'd been through, the betrayal, the lies, the pain. I thought about walking away, letting her family take over, and focusing on my kids. But when I looked at her, so small and vulnerable in that hospital bed, I couldn't leave. Not entirely. Months passed. Claire moved into a treatment center, and I found myself in a limbo I couldn't escape. She called occasionally, her voice filled with gratitude and regret. She was working on herself, she said, trying to make sense of her actions and rebuild what little she could. But the damage was done. The kids struggled in their own ways. Emma became withdrawn, burying herself in books and homework, while Ben acted out, seeking attention wherever he could. I tried to be strong for them, but the cracks in my armor grew with each passing day. One evening, as I tucked Ben into bed, he looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Dad," he whispered, "is Mommy ever coming home?" I hesitated, the weight of the question crushing me. "I don't know, buddy," I admitted. "But no matter what happens, we're going to be okay." He nodded, though I wasn't sure if he believed me. I wasn't even sure if I believed myself. Claire never fully recovered. Her physical health improved, but her spirit remained fractured. She stayed in treatment for over a year, and when she was finally released, she moved to a small apartment nearby. We maintained a cordial relationship for the sake of the kids, but the warmth that once existed between us was gone. One rainy afternoon, as I watched the kids play in the living room, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I'll always love you." I stared at the message for a long time before typing a response, "Take care of yourself, Claire." It wasn't the ending I had hoped for. There were no clean breaks, no fresh starts. Just the jagged edges of a life torn apart, pieced together as best as I could manage. And while the scars of betrayal and loss would never fully heal, I found solace in one truth: I had done everything I could. And in the end, that would have to be enough.